Hey guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. Today we are diving into chapter 29 in the book of Jubilees. So let's get started.
All right, guys, let's get started in verse 1. And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Laban went to shear his sheep, for they were distant from him a three days' journey. And Jacob saw that Laban was going to shear his sheep, and Jacob called Leah and Rachel, and spake kindly unto them that they should come with him into the land of Canaan. For he told them now he had seen everything in a dream, even all that he had spoken unto him, that he should return to his father's house. And they said, to every place whither thou goest, we will go with thee. And Jacob blessed the Elohim of Isaac his father, and the Elohim of Abraham his father. Of his father's father. And he arose and mounted his wives and his children, and took all his possessions, and crossed the river, and came to the land of Gilead. And Jacob hid his intention from Laban, and told him not. And in the 7th year of the 4th week, Jacob turned his face towards Gilead, in the 1st month, on the 21st thereof. And Laban pursued after him, and overtook Jacob in the mountain of Gilead, in the 3rd month of the 13th thereof. And Yahweh did not suffer him to injure Jacob, for he appeared to him in a dream by night. And Laban spake to Jacob, and on the 15th of those days, Jacob made a feast for Laban, and for all who came with him. And Jacob sware to Laban that day, and Laban also to Jacob, that neither should cross the mountain of Gilead to the other with evil purpose. And he made there a heap for a witness, wherefore the name of that place is called the heap of witness after this heap. So now we're getting a little bit more of the story here too, of how he was able to get everyone out of the camp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because at first I was like, okay, how is he doing this? I mean, were they that far apart from each other? Did they live around the corner from each other? What's going on? And
was this some secret thing that happened? Just everybody was in the know except Laban, kind of thing, or
right. So now we know he was three days away. So in Jacob's mind, I'm sure he's going, wait a minute, 3 days away? Yeah, that's enough for me to get everybody together, get the whole place packed up, and get rolling.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Jacob waited for Laban to go shear his sheep. He's like, all right, now's the time. Let's go. He's gonna be busy for a minute.
Oh yeah, just a minute.
Well, what's cool about it is it wasn't so much that he just had this wild nerve, this wild thought process that came out. And he says that for he told them how he had seen everything in a dream there at the beginning of verse 3. So go figure, right? Jacob and the sons are now starting these dream patterns are starting to play out a little bit more. And also it was right after Joseph was born. So I thought that was an interesting connection, because Joseph's many dreams and how that plays a factor in Joseph's story. But he had a dream. He's like, I think it's time to go. And this makes sense. This is the right time. This is the right place. Laban's not going to let me leave on good terms. So, we're going to have to take unconventional methods to get this done. So I thought that was really cool that dream was a part of that story right after we get, Joseph showing up on the scene.
So the other thing I found interesting here as well is the way that he spoke kindly to them. And so that made me wonder, like, he didn't go to them saying, oh, by the way, woman and woman and woman and woman, get up on the camel, we're rolling out, be beating his chest and being, the masculine he-man here. But he said he went to them, he spoke kindly to them. And so I thought that was like, it was one of those things where it's like, I could probably make you go, but I'd rather come to you out of a place of love rather than a place of dominance or a place of whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think also because he wanted this to be something like, hey, I want this to be, you really want to go.
Right.
Because let's face it, they're not having the worst of life there. They're actually being very blessed while they're there. It's not like they're living in the bad side of town and they're just, life's hard on them all the time, man. Jacob is being blessed. Not only is he being blessed, but Laban really doesn't want to let him go, because Laban's like, if you leave, there goes my meal ticket.
Right.
So I thought that was pretty cool, though, that he went to them. He's like, hey, as much as it may say that he didn't like, Rachel as much, or I'm sorry, Leah, that he went and spoke to both of them and said, hey, I love you and I love the kids. I love everybody. But, I had a dream last night and we really need to get out of town. And I love their response for them, because they said in the end of verse 3, to every place whither thou goest, he will go. It says, we will go with thee.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really cool. They're like, hey, we love you too, husband. And you're right. If you saw this vision, that's the cool part, is they trusted him enough that when he said, I had a vision, I had a dream, Yahweh saying it's time to go, they're like, you know what, husband, we trust you. You lead the way. So I thought that was fantastic. There wasn't any, like, well, I don't want to leave. All my family's here.
Right.
Well, so he didn't just leave though. Yeah, that's one of the things that I was looking at was, yeah, of course these ladies, this is their family, this is their life, this is their home. So he's not just saying, hey, let's go do the next part of the adventure. He's like, hey, let's leave everything and start fresh somewhere else that you've never seen or heard of, and hopefully it's okay. So it is a very positive conversation, at least the way that we can see it written down was he brought it to them kindly. They responded in turn. And we know the story is a success later on down the road, but in this moment, they're like, I have to leave everything and everybody for your dream, and that's a hard ask, especially in today's world. Like a dream is not security. You want security all the way through, and they had security there. But Jacob knew better. Jacob had a vision, had a plan, had a calling in his life that he knew he had to follow. And when he left, he said he left. He took all his wives, his children, and all his possessions. So he didn't, like it's kind of like the Grinch on Christmas Eve. He took everything all the way down to the last can, right? So he cleaned up, took care of business, and headed out. And of course it's no wonder Laban catches up to him. It's like, well, you left with all the stuff and all the people and
Right.
ladies and kids and stuff. Like Laban's going to catch you. But I wonder if in Jacob's mind, if there was ever even an opportunity in his head that, oh, Laban's going to come chase after me. Maybe he was like, you know what? If God gave me the dream, it's going to be fine. I wonder if we get like the details of that dream of like, you're going to leave and then he's going to catch you. And then you got to figure it out. Or if it was just leave and have faith on the rest of the journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you said there, Jonathan, too, because they when they left camp, the only thing that was left was one single string of party lights that had a little spark in it because it had a short in the wire. So when Laban shows up, he's like, "What what's going on here?" It's like he's like, "Y'all ain't going on. You're not going on a 2-week vacation. On a cruise. You're actually gone.
Mm-hmm.
Gone. Yep.
Gone."
And I think it's cool to point out here too, right at the very beginning, or at verse 4, it says, and Jacob blessed the Elohim of Isaac his father and Elohim of Abraham his father's father, and he arose and loaded up the minivan and all that. Right. So that was first and foremost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bless the Most High. Then we go.
Yeah, but I think it was something like this, Kyle. Thank you, God, that they agreed to go with me. Thank you. That's why he's blessing El. He's like, thank you.
So, I mean, I'm getting like, this is the first official road trip, right? Like, you think this is where the phrase "Are we there yet?" came about?
Well, it definitely sounds like they had to get out of Dodge in their caravan.
There you go. I really do think that we need to trace more of this, all these details, because I think there's got to be some significance to it, or there wouldn't be a reason for it. You know what I mean? So, for example, in verse 5, it says, and in the 7th year of the 4th week, Jacob turned his face toward Gilead in the 1st month on the 21st thereof. Like, okay, in general conversation, what difference does that make, right? Like, this is so specific. I mean, can you imagine telling a story to somebody, oh, how long ago was it that you guys moved to Savannah? Oh, we moved down here about 15 years ago in the 4th week, in the 2nd month, on the 3rd day. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not how you tell a story, right? That's not how you give information. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my Lord.
So, I mean, I know that this does trace the Jubilees and all that kind of stuff. There's something that tells me that there's got to be more to this that we're missing. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's the whole purpose of the Book of Jubilees is it's giving us all the definitive times and it's tracking the history. I think this is not the key reason for this book, but one of the key reasons is that it goes back with such being very so specific about times and dates. And I think that when we can go back, it actually helps us to plug them into like with Noah's flood. We know that when we plug that back in, the dates that we get out of that and how they fall, especially on the priestly calendar, Jonathan, it's amazing because all of a sudden you see this story even has more depth to it. It's not just around, well, it was on the first day of this month of this, this time. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's breaking down all the different seasons and the different parts of the priestly calendar. So we see that there was a lot of intention by our Heavenly Father when he gives us these dates and how we can plug them in. And so I agree with you, Kyle, that if we were to take all these dates and go back and we plug them into the priestly calendar, I guarantee that we would actually see some type of pattern forming there. Yeah, it would probably blow our minds. It's not there just for the sake of going, oh, on this day it happened. Oh, cool.
Right,
And,
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know.
And the
So-
other thing that's cool about that, I'm sorry, Jonathan, just real quick. The other thing that's cool about that is it being as specific as it is. Like, if you're trying to tell a story that's not real, you know what I mean? You don't get to these kind of specifics because you can easily be proven wrong. Right. And it's just detail after detail after detail that's given where you can go back and check references and, cross-reference all this other stuff. So I think that just lends to the validity even more. This being, inspired writing. Okay, Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. I think there's a couple crumbs that I have on that, and they're not gluten free, but they may be unleavened. So what I mean by that is this is the 21st day of the first month. If we look at the priestly calendar, it's on a very regulated schedule. There's not a lot of flexibility. There's not any man-made counting items. It's just first month. 14 days later, you do Passover. Next 7 days, or within that 7 days, you're doing unleavened bread. So the reason why I think this is written in there that way, and why we get a little bit more details, we are seeing feast day. We're seeing feast times. That's one of the details that I know that doesn't just get displayed. It doesn't say, oh, and then we were leaving right at the end of Passover. What also I find is interesting is Laban's out work. Not to say you're not allowed to work during unleavened bread, but he's out doing sheep and doing some other stuff. And it seems like Jacob had to wait to have a dream. Like it doesn't seem like the time to start a journey. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like on his own accord. He was like, I'm going to head out. And I think that lends to him really being led by the Spirit, and this being a God timed event and not a man timed event, because there's no way, if he's keeping feast days properly, that he's like, I'm going to plan my whole trip to leave and never come back in the middle of a feast day. That,
Right.
it seems like the logic isn't there. It
Right.
could be, but I thought that was a really interesting kind of, like I said, breadcrumb, and I did use that, on purpose, but a breadcrumb that's left there for us to kind of see how much this had to have been. I am God and I said go. Otherwise, this would not be the normal event. This would not.
Right.
This separates it even more out of the norm and makes it a very specific event for a specific time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, during feast days and whatnot, like even us, as unaware as we are compared to them, right, about the calendar and all that stuff, and the Father's holy days and set apart times, all that stuff, as unaware as we are compared to where they were, even us, I mean, we're going to plan our trip to be there so that we're at a location during the feast or festival, or we're just not going to go in the middle of it, right? Like we're going to be planted at home, or we're going to go before and leave after, right? Like we're not going to be traveling during a feast or festival, right? So yes, that very specifically points to them doing what the Lord tells them to.
Well, and also we got to remember, this is Moses writing this, who just left Egypt during the Passover, is at Mount Sinai. He's very familiar with first month, 14th day, 15, 16. He's very familiar with this time frame and this schedule. And he's like, wait a second. We had to leave around this time and get out of Dodge. You guys had to leave and get out. And these both were not under very good circumstances. Very interesting. And he's shearing the sheep, and they had to slaughter the sheep. There were just a lot of connections that I made. I don't know if they're all 100% connected, but you could see the writer Moses on the mountain, like, I kind of see the story here. I just did this like 2 weeks ago. This is actually kind of interesting to me.
And then if we go just a little bit further, we've got over here, it talks about in verse 5, it says, in the third month, on the 13th thereof, and Yahuwah did not suffer him to injure, da-da-da-da-da. Laban spoke, and on the 15th of those days, Jacob made a feast for Laban. And then this reference is over here on the right-hand side. It says Savan 15 is Shavuot / Pentecost, which Jacob celebrated long before Moses, which I think that's also great to point out that these were feasts and festivals that were celebrated long before. Now, is this referring to this feast that he made for Laban? I would assume
so.
that it is.
Yeah.
So I find that really interesting. So they stop, set up camp, create a feast, and do this. And hey, Laban, come on, bro. Come on, father-in-law, whatever.
Yeah, you have a chance to be a part of the good story. Don't mess this up. Well, and it's also another familiar reference where it's like, oh, we leave and then the bad guys chase us. You know, the Egyptians chased after, Pharaoh chased after. They didn't win, of course. They got swallowed up by the water. And then Laban's like, you know what? I'm going to try that. I'm going to see if I can chase you guys down and catch you. You know, so I thought that even the story like of how they left was very ironically similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. You know, I just did a quick look back on our last chapter we did in chapter 28. And actually, because when you just made my mind just kind of like my wheels started turning, Kyle, a little bit. Because you don't have to go to it if you don't want to, if it's too much. But on verse 24 of 28, Joseph is actually born, according to the priestly calendar, is born on the day of remembrance. So on the day of remembrance, as it says, Adam and Eve expelled from the Garden of Eden. Angels appear to Abraham to announce Isaac's birth. Joseph is born on this day, and Jacob enters Egypt. That's in Jubilees 45. We're not there yet, but that's kind of interesting. Again, very intentional with these dates. So they're not just random, like, hey, next week on Friday you leave.
Right.
You know, don't let the door hit you on the way out. But anyway, so I'm glad you said that because that's interesting. I mean, just that one day, there's what, 1, 2, 3, at least 4 events that took place on the fourth month on that day. So anyway, that's pretty cool.
So we've spoke about this before, kind of switching up subjects a little bit. You know, at the time of this feast, and it says you made the feast for Laban and all who came with him, right? So this is a feast for everybody to partake in. And just below that, it says, Jacob sware to Laban that day, and Laban also to Jacob, that neither should cross the mountain of Gilead to the other with evil purpose. So, you know, we're going, I believe that covenant is still in place today, and individuals who are on those camps that cross with evil purpose, well, they get dealt with. That's just my thought.
That's interesting. Gilead and all the mountains are on the right side of the river there.
You want to pull up a picture?
Sure.
All right, cool. So this is the best I could find real quick. So if this gives you any idea, this little square box right here, I know it's hard to see on the screen, guys. I apologize. But this blue area down at the bottom, that's the Dead Sea. Let's see. Right here where my cursor is Jerusalem. Down below is Hebron. And up here is Nazareth. Over here is Mount Carmel. So, and down here is Mount Nebo. So this right here in the square box, specifically right here, is Mount Gilead. That gives you an idea.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is if you look at like the quote unquote current geographical lines of the nation of Israel, that from the Dead Sea up to that body of water right above it, that's a river there. That's the Jordan River. And to the left of it is Israel, and to the right of it, you know, we're looking at another country. And back then, you know, of course, there wasn't countries and defined lines and things like that as they are today. But it's interesting to see that play out in modern times in the brand new country that showed up in the 47, give or take, that they still have that same line drawn of, hey, to the left, Israel, to the right, not so much.
So do you think the Mount Gilead goes all the way down to the Jordan Valley?
I don't think so. I know it's in modern day Jordan, because as it crossed over the border. But I mean, it could be a mountain range. I don't know if it spoke to it in the way of it being a single mountain, but
it kind of seems to be.
Yeah, It seems like that was the case.
Okay, very cool.
The more you know.
And next thing is, and he made there a heap for a witness, wherefore the name of that place is called the heap of witness, after this heap. So I find that really interesting because, you know, we see these piles of rocks, right? Like when I hear heap, I think of a pile of rocks or something. And we hear this idea of, you know, even Yeshua saying, if no one speaks, the rocks will cry out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a witness there, a true witness. I just think that that's really cool. I think that's really neat that rocks are a witness, that the ground would cry out. That's crazy to me. Like, to think about that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I get excited about little stuff. Sorry.
You get excited about rocks.
Well, if you look at it on Jacob's journey up, you know, he gets the rock that he lays down on, beside, around, you know, and that he anoints with oil that morning. And so we're kind of getting that same concept as on the way out of the land. He puts the rock, and now, you know, looking back, this could be a marker. Like, I mean, I know we kind of talked about it, but it could be a geographical marker of, this is the border of when I'm getting ready to cross over, I put the rock down. And then now he's getting ready to cross back over into the land again at Mount Gilead. And I'm putting the heap up here. This is a couple more rocks, so we don't get, you know, we don't have any question marks later on. And he's like,
Right.
hey, this is the line between me and you. You can stay over there. I'll stay over here. As long as everything's good, we're good. And maybe he was doing that same thing on the way up of, hey, I'm leaving home now. I'm leaving my territory. Put the rock down. Let everybody know Jacob passed through here. This is me. All good. I'm coming in peace. You know, so that way this rock is that, because it said you can cross over, but without any evil intent. So very interesting to see that play out on the way in and on the way out, like almost like he had a format or a formula to it.
Here's a thought too, guys. What do you think about this? So sometimes, again, I've said this, I'll say it many times, God has to deal with us. He has to deal with this, which isn't always good to deal with. So I'm gonna back it up just a smidge. And back in the end of verse 4, and it says, and Jacob hid his intention from Laban and told him not. Do you really think that was part of Abba's plan for him just to split town and not make peace before he leaves? That's just my thoughts. It was like, because here's the deal. God allowed him to be caught.
Mm-hmm.
If God had no intentions of Jacob ever being caught and dust in the wind, we're rolling out, I don't think that Laban could have, with all the intention in the world, all the looking into the chicken bones in a bowl, would have never found them.
Right.
So with this, what you're seeing is guys like, yeah, I mean, I want you to leave, but how about let's leave on good terms? Let's not burn any bridges when we leave. This is still family. So guess what? Yeah, go ahead and get your journey going, but your father-in-laws will catch up with you.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're seeing here, though, is the fact that they're like, hey, you know what? We both did some wrong here. And let's make peace. So we're not going to ever cross over this. We're not going to have any ill intentions towards one another. We're not going to try to murder one another. We're not going to try to take advantage of one another. I think this, to me, I just see this working out as the father kind of stepping in, going, you know what? Let's do this a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Laban hasn't been the best to you, but at the same time, where you've been at, you've been blessed. I have blessed you, Jacob. I bless you, bless you, bless you. You're carrying the kingdoms, the 12 tribes with you, all these things. So how about we just leave on a good note? How about we just not have this dysfunction within this family continue to fester? You know, the whole thing that happened with his brother earlier, from the lentil soup to you know, the deception or whatever we want to call it with his dad. All these things are taking place, and it's kind of leaving a bad taste in everyone's mouth as you go along the way. So how about let's just make this a lot better, so that at least the family, when you get together for Thanksgiving, you know, we're not having a staring contest and having bitter feelings. So
Right. Well, and they set up the biblical TSA station there at Mount Gilead, so I think they were good. You know, check your goods before you cross the border.
there you go.
And how crazy is this?
What is your intentions here, please?
How crazy is this that Laban is still fence sitting when it comes to Yah? Like, he knows Yah's word. He's making covenants based on you know, a covenant between Jacob and him.
Yep.
And Jacob's not going to use any other god with his covenant. So a little bit of fence sitting going on, right?
Oh, absolutely. Hey, look, I said last video, I'll say this one: Laban was an opportunist.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, whatever can benefit me, if it's serving Ra over here or whatever god, or serving the God of Jacob, Isaac, the whole thing, whatever benefits me, that's who I'm gonna be for whatever it takes.
All right, well, let's get going.
Let's do it, guys. Verses pick up in verse 9. But before they used to call the land of Gilead the land of the Rephaim, for it was the land of the Rephaim, and the Rephaim were born there, giants whose height were 10, 9, 8, down to 7 cubits. And their habitation was from the land of the children of Ammon to Mount Hermon. And the seats of their kingdom were Carneum, Ashtaroth, and Edrei, and Misur, and Beon. And Yahuwah destroyed them because of the evil of their deeds, for they were very malignant. And the Amorites dwelt in their stead, wicked and sinful, and there is no people today which hath wrought to the full of their sins, and they have no longer length of life on the earth. And Jacob sent away Laban, and he departed into Mesopotamia, the land of the east, and Jacob returned to the land of Gilead. Fee, fi, fo, fum.
Okay. What you got on this one, boys?
Well, to me, it's just more evidence that there was people of extraordinary size that lived. Back in the time of the biblical times, and there are people out there that will say, "Oh, there was no giants, and that was just, I don't know, fairy tales or stuff that was just written." But between the canon that we have and between the Book of Jubilees so far, we're giving more and more information about there was people of extraordinary size. Yeah. Just on this side footnote right there, Kyle, it's kind of giving this for some people who may wonder what these cubics are. It says at least 15 to 10 feet tall in estimation. These were the Nephilim. This is why Israel was told to wipe out even the women, children, and animals of certain tribes in Canaan. They were not human. Right. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, and let's point out it does say at least, because there's different ideas of what a cubit is, right? So this is a minimum of 10 to 15 feet.
Yeah, I think Aga Bashad they guesstimated his height to be around 15 feet tall because his bed was actually found, or his bed spoken of in the Bible, and his bed was 13 feet long. And back then, you would actually sleep with your feet hanging off of the bed to warm yourself at night during the wintertime. They would actually have coals at the foot of the bed that would warm their feet. So anyway, at least that's what I was told. So Aga Bashad, let me say something. Look up the world's tallest man, and I forgot his name, but I believe he was 8 foot 11 inches tall. And when you see, now he had gigantism, which is different. These people don't have gigantism. They are perfectly, proportioned large people. But when you see this gentleman next to other people at 8 foot 11 inches tall, it's just night and day. So can you imagine seeing someone who's 15 feet tall, who's proportioned? Yeah. Proportional person at 15 feet tall? You would definitely say that is a giant, 100%.
Which I find hilarious that they even say that the tallest man was 8 feet, whatever, because we actually have original old video footage of film footage of the not doctored, of certain Asian individuals. Right now, the average height of the Asian over there, I want to say was like 5'7", 5'8", something like that, maybe, of a man. So there was plenty of full-grown men around there, right, standing next to this individual, and he was not just head and shoulders. He was half his body was taller than everybody else. So to say that 8 feet is the largest man, we have actual proof that that's not the case. They're
Right.
much taller than that.
Well, the
And
Smithsonian also had actual proof of skeletons that are,
Of
oh,
course.
we don't know where they're at, Bo. I'm sorry.
yeah,
They're gone.
yeah.
Yeah, so to some of you guys' points there, the guy you were talking about, Joe, is Robert Walderlow, and he was 8'11", so almost 9 feet tall.
Mhm.
And they said that he weighed in at 222 kilograms, which is, I had to do some math because I don't,
Right.
I do English, but it's almost 500 pounds.
Yeah.
And he wasn't like a fat guy or whatever. He was
No,
tall,
not at all.
he was fairly skinny. And so I was looking up what a 15-foot guy could weigh. If they continue the math of proportionality and all that stuff, you're looking at close to 2,500 pounds.
Yeah, I was going to guess about 3,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're an average, when I say average, if you're around 200-pound guy, there's 14 of you to equal one of them, and that's just weight. That's not even strength or breathing, lungs, all the things that person would have in proportion to you. 14 ants versus it just doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like we think in our head, oh, if we could just even out the scales, you're like, no. If you're that big, you're on another playing field. You're doing things that humans, even in a group, can't do.
Can you imagine, Jonathan, how much food someone weighing through? And here's the deal: when you looked at those numbers, I wonder if that was corresponding to someone who's proportional, because the gentleman that you just said his name, he was not proportional. He was looked like someone just took it and stretched him out. So you take someone that's proportional, like if that man had been almost 9 feet tall and actually had the broad shoulders and he was proportional to that, and he was about 500 pounds, I think he could easily throw another 500 pounds on there. I think you're easily looking at someone that's 1,100, 1,200 pound guy. That's the same with Goliath. Because over the years the stories have changed of how tall they say was 12 foot, between 9 and 12 foot. Let's just say that, because again,
Still big.
Yeah, it's still big. So you take Goliath, who was a warrior that's proportioned, and I've said this before in my teachings a long time ago. He was probably on the low side, about 1,200 pounds.
Yeah.
And you're looking at a little shepherd boy who's probably 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah.
Taking on this, the guy's spear weighs more than David does.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So there's
yeah. It's hard to even consider the options of like how many implications are there. We just say, oh, tall and big, but like you said, you got food, you got how fast can you run? Well, I don't know. Every step is 30 of yours. I mean, literally, the numbers get crazy all of a sudden when you start playing out real life. Like, oh, I'm gonna jump in the water and swim. You're like, I can stand up to like 15 feet. Like the pool is nothing to me. Like I'm getting my ankles wet. You know what I mean? Like This is just the different thought process of like how that would look in today's world. You know what I mean? Like you're talking a story and a half worth of a human just walking around and at a full body size. It's nuts. And you see that those details are thrown in here because it's letting us know, hey, when we read the Bible, these are real events, these are real stories. There's a reason why the Israelites were like, can we just stay over here? Can we just take this fertile land down at the bottom, because that's 15 feet, and I know, God, you said you got it, but this isn't natural. This isn't normal. These guys are literally, I mean, if you had a farm of cows, this guy's eating the whole herd by himself. You know what I mean? Like we don't even he's not milking the cow. He's not taking a steak. He's eating the entire cow times 30.
Let me say this. If you guys are familiar with Andre the Giant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the wrestler, other than what he did in the ring, his feats of eating are mind-boggling. And they would talk about how he could literally drink 12 bottles of wine, eat two full turkeys, or two full like multiple chickens at one time. And they said the amount of food that he would put away, that when he was in Japan, of course, the Japanese culture, they fed him for free. When he would show up to wrestle there, they were amazed how much this man could put away, and they would literally just keep feeding him to see how much he could eat. This is only someone who's 7 feet tall. And he roughly weighed about 500 pounds before he passed away. And so, again, someone, let's just say 15 feet tall, weighing in probably about, 3,500 pounds. And can you imagine? Like, he makes Andre look like a toddler eating.
Right.
And this is where I think, too, guys, when it goes back into verse 11 at the end there, And he says, and they have no longer length of life on the earth. I think this is my personal thing. Okay. We know prior to the flood, scientifically, that the atmospheric pressure here on Earth was much greater. There was a higher saturation of oxygen. Everything grew bigger. I am personally, I'm not saying anything scientific here on my end, but I'm not a scientist, though I play one on television. Okay. But if the Earth's atmosphere was that much denser with oxygen, that promotes growth, it promotes health, it promotes. They said prior to the flood, they guesstimate that the average human could run flat out for 30 miles and just, I mean, booking it and not even have their heart rate elevated. They wouldn't be out of wind. They're just go, go, go. Because on a molecular structure, that the oxygen is healing their cells. I mean, that's the whole thing with hyperbaric chambers, is it infuses oxygen to promote healing.
Mhm.
Well, this is my personal thing. I think this is what happened after the flood, post flood. We see a decline in the atmospheric pressure. It keeps seeing a decline, a decline, a decline. By the time we get to Goliath, Goliath's still a big guy, but let's say they said at the tallest, maybe 9 feet tall, between 7 and 9 feet tall, something like that. But if the father's intentionally moving that oxygen level down, 15 footers and 20 footers, even 30 footers, if we go back to the scripture, it talks about the cedars of Lebanon. Cedars of Lebanon grew to 20 to 30 feet. If you're a 30-foot individual, I don't think there's enough atmospheric pressure in today's world. The way I think guys purposely weaned that off. He's like, yeah, we're not going to be living with all these giants. We're going to make it really. It's about asthma or not being able to breathe. We're going to weaken them to the point, and that's why also I think that when David shows up with his men and the giants are there, and he's defeating giants, he defeats Goliath's brothers, he defeats all these other races of giants. I think at that point the oxygen level had come down to a point where they didn't have the energy they used to have. And God's like, now go in. I'm not saying the angels didn't help. I'm not saying that God didn't intervene. But what I'm saying is if you take someone of that size and they don't have the same amount of oxygen, they're going to wear down really fast. They're not going to be able to fight like they used to fight. And so make it a lot easier for the normal size, quote unquote, people to go in and overtake them. That's just my personal take on that.
Well, that changes the television programming back then. With My 1,000 Pound Life, it was a little bit different.
Yeah. It also makes me think about the weight that they would have been able to lift and what could have been built by them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But that's another conversation for another time. So a couple of little things here I did want to bring up is over here in verse 10. It says, and their habitation was from the land of the children of Ammon to Mount Hermon. And the seats of their kingdom were Carnium and Asheroth and Edrei and Misur and beyond. So those are the 5 places in between there. Over to the right side, it says in the Masoretic text of Genesis 14:5, Asheroth, Carnaim is one place. But in the Syriac and some other scriptures and the Septuagint and et cetera, support the text that's here that is actually a separate place. And Septuagint being older than Masoretic. So
right.
It says, and Yahuwah destroyed them because of the evil of their deeds, for they were very malignant. We have a video on malignant spirits. We might want to check that out. And it says, and the Amorites dwelt in their stead, or in their place, wicked and sinful, and there is no people today which hath wrought to the full all their sins, and they have no longer a length of life on the earth. So these were some bad peoples.
Mm-hmm. And God let them live there for a while in those different cities, but they couldn't go beyond.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the name of the city, beyond.
Yeah, and that's why, that's where before the children of Israel came in from Mitzrayim, that says, I'm going to give you fields you didn't plow, homes you didn't build, all these vineyards you didn't plant, all this stuff is because God allowed this people group. He's like, hey, I'm going to let you live here and you're going to prosper. But when my people get here, you got to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it does have another little note off to the side on the left here. It says Israel did all but wipe out some tribes, but
Right.
not all.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting.
Well, I don't want to go on the Nephilim trip too much, but that's where when David comes in and David's picking up that mantle again of getting rid of all the people in the land. That's where the stories come in from England, from Britain, and all that stuff about the giants. They believe that what happened when David was driving them out, that they were all spreading out, and those who were left over made their way into the Scottish territory, the Irish territory, all up within that region. And I was all of a sudden in their folklores that they have, it speaks of these giants showing up. And then so they have this whole festival every year or something like that in tribute to the giants or the very large people. So anyway, it's kind of interesting that where they fled into different areas and how it changed the history there as well.
Yeah, and the last thing that I think we see in this little section here is in verse 12, it actually talks about Jacob sent away Laban. So one, that shows that Jacob's kind of taken the authority now. Jacob's kind of taken the responsibility of the family and situation. He's like, all right, I'm sending you away. You're not sending me away. And what he did was he sent them to the map to the right, to the east, which is away from the modern day Israel. When Jacob did the opposite, he went to the left, which is modern day Israel. And I'm glad that we get that point there that kind of gives us a little bit of that, cardinal direction, a little bit of what actually transpired after this little meet and greet and separation. But hey, Joe, if you don't mind, go ahead and get us into the next section.
All right, let's do it, guys. Verse 13. And he passed over to Jabbok in the 9th month, and on the 11th thereof, and on that day Esau his brother came to him, and he was reconciled to him, and departed from him unto the land of Seir. But Jacob dwelt in tents, and in the first year of the 5th week, in this Jubilee, he crossed the Jordan, and dwelt beyond the Jordan, and he pastured his sheep from the sea of the heat unto Bethshan, and unto Dotham, and unto the forest of Akrabim. And he sent to his father Isaac all of his substance, clothing and food and meat and drink and milk and butter and cheese and some dates of the valley. And to his mother Rebekah also 4 times a year between the times of the months, between plowing and reaping, and between autumn and the rain, and between winter and spring, to the tower of Abraham. For Isaac had returned from the well of the oath, and had gone up to the tower of his father Abraham, and he dwelt there apart from his son Esau. For in the days when Jacob went to Mesopotamia, Esau took to himself a wife, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, and he gathered together all the flocks of his father and his wives, and went up and dwelt on Mount Seir, and left Isaac his father at the well of the oath alone. And Isaac went up from the well of the oath, and dwelt in the tower of Abraham his father on the mountains of Hebron, and thither, right? Jacob sent all that he did send his father and his mother from time to time, and all they needed, and they blessed Jacob with all their heart and with all their soul.
Awesome,
man.
So we're getting
a good boy.
We're getting a quick reconciliation. I mean, we're not going to spoil it too much, but it's like hey, I haven't seen you in a while,
right?
Okay,
We good,
bro?
We good?
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
we're good. All right.
Yeah, no conversation was really had. They don't really go back and dig into anything. They don't actually really resolve any issues. So I think maybe that's why we see that fester up a little bit. But here it's welcome. It's, hey, what's up? Hey, I married a wife. You're over here. You're in tents. I'm in houses. We're whatever. And it's just kind of giving us the setup. This is like the intro to the next part of the story. We're not getting a lot of details yet. We're just getting the, hey, so these guys talked and they met up and they still got mom and dad and people are doing some marriage stuff.
I wonder if so Esau's got his houses and stuff. Jacob shows up with tents, and you know what I mean. He's got some women, he's got some things going on, but he's a Bedouin at this point, right?
Hmm?
I wonder if they were reconciled for this time period, simply because Esau was like, "Oh, wait a minute, he got the blessing, and this is how he's living."
Yeah, this isn't a threat.
Look, are you kidding me? Look how I'm living. I've got houses. He's got tents.
Yep.
Maybe so. Just a thought. And then
Yep.
later on, when he sees the blessings start playing out, then he's like, hey, wait a minute.
Wait a minute. Well, what's cool again is we see some reconciliation taking place now.
Mm-hmm.
So he reconciles with Laban and his brother. You know, there's a past there, and so this has been what, over 21 years at this point. About 21 years between him and his brother. So this again, I think this is the father's hand moving in this because nothing's by coincidence. So I think he's like, hey, you're not going to leave Laban. We're not burning bridges. We're going to, hey, I know I don't like him either, but we're going to make this right.
Mm-hmm.
And so your brother Esau, you know, there's a moment here where at least we can say, hey, we can be civil. If anything else, we can just be civil with one another.
Right. And I think to Kyle's point, you know, when we look there at the verse 3, it says that Esau came out, he came to him. So this wasn't Jacob saying, hey, I'm entering your land, I'm entering where you would normally be at. Esau is the one who takes the initiative to come out. And I think it's to Kyle's point of, hey, who are you and what do you have? Let me do a little quick inspection. Let me check and make sure if you're a threat or not. Let me check and see if I have to worry about how this future's going. He's like, okay, you got a couple wives, got some kids, and a bunch of spotted goats, whatever. Like, no big deal. I'm good.
Right.
I'm gonna go back and do what I was doing. But I did think it was interesting that Esau was like, he's taking ownership of that land. He comes out and says, hey, what are you doing here? But also it's interesting that, you know, my brain sometimes doesn't do old. Like how there's no cell phone, there's no text message, there's no GPS. Like, how did he know Jacob showed up? Do they just have spies everywhere? Do they just have like little small camps everywhere? And then just
Probably.
word gets out. You know, it's just kind of, it's hard to like live in that world in my brain because we're so far removed from it. It's like, hey, I showed up 400 miles away. Oh yeah, I came to meet you. Why? How? What is what? Why? I could have been. I haven't even been 400 miles. Sometimes, like, I don't know what's 400 miles away. Kyle's not even 400 miles away from me. I don't know what's going on over there. I have no idea. And we have technology,
right? No, I think that's it. I think they had camps and lookouts and people, you know, running and telling, and you know, you got to look out for bad guys coming. You know,
right? With the giants across the way,
right, right. I gotta giggle when you were talking though, Joe. I had to share this. So it just reminded me when you were bringing up the fact that this is, you know, 21 plus years have gone by. It reminded me of Jacob's mom. It's like, go hang out with Laban for a couple of days, you know?
right?
Yeah, right.
And he goes on this extra long journey and is gone for 21 years. That's
funny. Well, I was looking on the priestly calendar too, just because it's making me think more about these dates. But there was nothing. There's no feast days. There's no anything other than on the priestly calendar. It does say that this was when Jacob and Esau met.
Mm-hmm.
So that there was. Yeah, I don't even see anything anywhere nearby. None of that stuff. So yeah. So it is recorded on the priestly calendar that they met. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, because I actually wasn't gonna go into the calendar kind of stuff yet, but in verse 16, it says to his mother Rebecca also 4 times a year, between the times of the months, between the plowing and the reaping, that's your spring and your fall, and between the autumn and the rain, again spring and fall, and your winter and spring. So it's really given us those seasons, those 4 dates that are in between each season. When we look at the Enoch Jubilees calendar, like it's self ratifying dates. You know, we see this throughout. It's not like, oh, we're going to bring the calendar up once in chapter 6 and never again. It's like, no. At 4 times a year during that period is whenever I was sending stuff back to mom and dad. This is how things were done. This is how business was conducted according to Bible people. You know, this wasn't I just do what I want on the dates that I want, however I want, or I have to wait for a certain sign in the sky to do something. He was like, no, 4 times a year between the seasons. Like it was like a known thing. It was obvious to everybody. And Jacob wasn't even living at home for 21 years, like you said. He kept this, and there was no, well, my calendar versus your calendar. Well, mom's Passover was on Tuesday, mine's on Thursday. It was like, no, this is the 4 times a year, and then we did the thing, and everything just happened. You know, it lets me know that even before Moses, there was a clear-cut, smooth, perfect version that like wasn't really alterable. Like there wasn't a adjustments, there wasn't anything kind of weird going on. It was just, oh yeah, this was the 4 times a year, and nobody disagreed. There was no, second opinion. There was no, anything weird going on. It was just very basic, and I love the idea of that because it does fit in with the other models that we see in Enoch Jubilees. And mostly through the canon, without the modified words of Kodesh and stuff like that.
Right.
Yep,
And
absolutely, bro.
he's honoring his father and mother.
Yep.
And it's like it's perfect timing, right? Because Isaac goes up to live in the tower, right? So dad's retiring, he's turning things over, letting Jacob do his deal, right? And now Jacob's taking care of everything. He's got everything under control at that point. So I think that's really cool to see all that play out. I did want to bring up something before we got too far ahead of this, though. I know we skipped this in 14. There is, if you notice the little crosses here, that's just to let you know there's a little note off to the side. So it says, and he pastured his sheep from the sea of the heap. Over to the left, it says text corrupt. Latin has from the salt sea. So, I mean, I would assume, just if Kyle was translating the English from the English here, I would say sea of the heap. That sounds like sea of the rocks to me, is what I would think. But obviously, this is an issue here. So from the salt sea, and then down.
Well, Kyle, real quick. So where that Mount Gilead is at is, like I said, we saw the map earlier. It's right above the Dead Sea. Mm-hmm. So to me, that made sense anyway. Whether it was Rock Sea, Heap Sea, or Dead Sea, Salt Sea, it's talking about the same place. All four definitions and words are all in the same geographical region. So I don't think it would be too hard for us to, that wouldn't be a stretch.
Well, there's two. So Mount Gilead is here, right in the square box. We have the Dead Sea down here, so that's your Salt Sea. Mm-hmm. But then we have what flows into the Dead Sea is the Jordan River, right? And that's coming from up north, which is the Sea of Galilee, and also it appears that maybe Lake Huron would flow into the Sea of Galilee, is what it appears to be anyway from this picture. And then down below the that one, there's another little cross section here. It says unto Bethshan and unto Dothan and unto the forest of Akrabim. It says it's read ascent, meaning, so it would read as and unto the ascent of Akrabim. Mm-hmm. So this says forest, but the ascent could mean mountains or high places or something. I don't know. So just wanted to point those out, that there's some things to look at there. Mm. And then, in 15 and 16, he's taking care of mom and dad. And then we have this part down here that talks about right beneath where you just finished reading, Jonathan, to the Tower of Abraham. What say you, boys? What's that all about?
Let's pull it up, Kyle. Let's read together.
All right, so Joe's got something he wanted to show. So go for it.
I was show and tell.
Yeah.
This is from one of the websites. If you can pull it down just a little bit, Kyle, so people can see that. Yep. Just so we give them their credit for what they did. So I just did a quick search on it because I was like, what is this Tower of Abraham? So let's move back up a little bit. According to the source, it says that Abraham lived near the brick tower of the ziggurat of Ur, and other discoveries closely related to biblical history are claimed in a report of C. Leonard Woolley, the noted archaeologist in charge of scientists from the University of Pennsylvania, now exploring in Babylonia. Says work was recently suspended owing to the hot weather and will be resumed in the autumn. Meanwhile, the scientists are busy opportuning the objects. I can't read it.
Apportioning.
Okay, it's small on my screen. Apportioning the objects dug up by them and their crew of 200 natives. A large part of the finds will be shipped to the University Museum this summer. Dr. Woolley reports that the workmen have exposed the ziggurat, the most imposing monuments of Ur of the Chaldees, which was destroyed in the 50th century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
before Christ. The ziggurat or tower was begun, but left unfinished by Ur and Gur and his sons, Dungai, kings of Ur, about 2300 BC. Since we must conclude, Dr. Woolley says that the Ur and Gur building, whose lower part survives today, was completed at least during his son's reign, and that when Abraham lived, at he looked up daily to the ziggurat.
Interesting.
So very interesting. And we just got one more that's very short.
Okay.
I'm going to let you read it because it's hard for me to see it on my screen, brother.
Sure. And this is coming from JewishEncyclopedia.com.
By Mr. Kaufman Kohler.
Yep. Kaufman Kohler. It says, often mentioned in the book of Jubilees as a mansion of great importance, said to have been built on the height of Hebron by Abraham, who bequeathed it to Jacob, his grandson. And then it's got some references here. And then it says, a midrash fragment, a midrashic fragment at the close of the Masket Sopharim 9 mentions an iron citadel built by Abraham of such a height that the sun's rays could not penetrate it. It received its light from a disk made of precious stones. Abraham gave it to the sons of Keturah, and when the last days sun and moon shall pale before the full light of God's glory, this tower will be opened in order to shelter God's own. Okay, so we getting into a little Kabbalah or something here? Like, what do we think this is, boys?
Well, I do believe that quote is out of that midrashic fragment. I think that's out of Talmud. That Masaket Sopharim.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a book title and chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, interesting.
So Babylonian information?
Well, what's interesting is it's the folklore behind it, right? Because we know this isn't scripture, right? I mean, we're not going to try to equate Talmud to anything scripture, of course, but this is things that have been passed on and carried on of, hey, these are the cool stories that, we don't read any of the Apocrypha books. We tried to hide them, but yet we're going to quote them and reference them often. And that's the only thing that we have to even, give us this information. So since we have the information, we have to do something with it. And instead of just kind of taking a more traditional stance of, it's a tower, it's a building, it's a something that, I think we kind of get a overly exaggerated, mystical kind of version of it that stops to make sense pretty quick. But again, that's why the Talmud doesn't hold up in most regards with scriptural context.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sorry. I just there ain't no special rocks gonna save you when Yeshua returns, ain't. But you better be on Team Yeshua is all I gotta say, because special rocks ain't gonna help you.
Right.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you pulling that up for us, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting info.
Yeah. Well, again, we get to see a little bit of the inside of how they would take their history, and really with the tower, it sounds like they embellished the story, or they make the whole thing sound like, the sun will be blotted out or whatever, in the special stones. I'm going, I don't think that was ever the intent for, we know that Abraham had a tower, but I don't think we're talking about something like the Tower of Babel or something that's like this extraordinary, gigantic,
right.
I am curious, what this was about. So the two examples that we looked at, that we pulled up, one was an example of some ziggurat that was built by somebody else, right, that Abraham was just looking at. And then we have this idea of Abraham building some kind of iron structure with magical rocks and whatever, and so giant it blocks out the sun that for some reason we can't find it, but it's so big it blocks out the sun, but we can't find it. So I don't know. I find that very interesting. And this was a tower. So when it says tower, I think of tall building because people went there to live in it. Right. So this wasn't just a monument. This wasn't just a
pole.
Yeah. Right.
Well, is it in Proverbs that talks about the Lord is a strong tower?
I was just thinking that the song from Cutlass.
So it makes me wonder too, if that was part of, they knew of this Tower of Abraham, and because he was a man of God, that this is actually put into the scriptures for that same reasons. Like the Father is a strong tower that the righteous run to and are safe. Safe or saved? I don't remember which one it says. Basically, same thing. They're saved or safe. So anyway, that's how this, you never know.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too, and out of those two stories, the first one was, speaking of well, we know where Abraham was from. He was from That's where he came from. So,
Mhm.
it's a little less far fetched, of course. But I actually enjoy Joe bringing these points up, and you guys kind of watching us walk through these. Is these are some of the scriptural and contextual debates, conversations that you have to go through and test it out. Like Kyle said, magic rocks in a tower that's too tall that it's not real. It's like, oh well, this is it started off telling you, hey, there's a bunch of rabbis got together and made up a cool story.
Yeah.
And there's a basis of truth there. It's like our tall tales in America, the Paul Bunyans and the John Henrys. Yeah, probably was a strong guy who could really, nail some railroad spikes in. There was a guy who could chop down some trees pretty quick. He wasn't, 300 feet tall with a blue ox. Like let's not say crazy stuff.
That ox name was Babe. Come on, man.
Well, I wanted to get the blue out because that's the impossible part. The name was okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's some stuff like that, and it helps us to lend credibility where it's deserved, and the lack of credibility where we should probably remove some of our quotes from. And when you read stuff like that, when you read things about the Messiah, those are like, okay, well, I have to push this book pretty far off. We can go back and refer to it when it comes to historical events or what people were thinking at that time. Not for let's take this home for theology and constructive thought
Right.
processes.
By the way, I want to, because I'd like to share the scripture with you real quick. It's Proverbs 18:10. It says, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower; the righteous runneth into it and is safe."
Mm.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay. And verse 17. It says, "For Isaac had returned from the well of the oath and gone up to the tower of his father Abraham. And he dwelt there apart from his son Esau." So he moved away from Esau.
Yeah. Maybe he knew something was coming up.
Mm.
All right, I got to say this real quick while it's on my mind. All right, so this is why I'm suspect of the story of the deception and that I still think Isaac was in on it. All right, how are you? I mean, is Dad dying for the next 21 years? You know what I'm saying? Like like Jacob's gone for 21 years. Oh, well, I can't see anymore, my boy, and my mind's not quite the same. But for another 21 years, I'm gonna hang in there. Another 21 years, I'm gonna move out. I'm gonna move over to the tower that my father built. I'm gonna do all these different things. So that's why something this little bit of me says, I think he was in on it.
Well,
I think he could have been playing the old man card. Oh, I can't see so well. So,
well,
you sound like Jacob, but you feel like Esau. Come on.
Well, it did tell us that the scripture does
know.
tell us that his perception was taken away, right?
Yes, that's true.
But yes, to your point, the way we read it in canon only is you don't hear anything about the perception or any of that. So what are we left with that original thing of either he was in on it or he was literally old as dirt and about to die and then magically lived another 20, 30 years, which then makes it not like he was about to die. So I do appreciate, Kyle, like you were saying, that we get that extra detail of his perception was temporarily removed from him. That's how this was able to go down. Because otherwise we're just adding more fiction to the story of trying to understand because it doesn't make sense. But now it does. Right. So I'm glad we read this.
If he's going to a tower means usually tall. So if this old guy's walking steps, he ain't on his deathbed yet.
Wait, they didn't have elevators?
Yeah, right. Yeah, they had the stones on a rope that was like,
No, this was a Hebrew retirement home. That's all.
That's right.
they had the stair lift thing.
There you go.
Yeah. He probably had some of the giants there. They were helping him out.
Look out for the new movie coming out, right? Just like the
right? Isaac and the Tower of Abraham.
Oh boy.
In a world.
So I don't know. What was his life prolonged? Simply because Jacob had to go up to Laban and do his thing for what they thought was going to be a very short time and ended up being much longer. So was his life prolonged? I don't know. Waiting on him to get back so that mantle could be passed on to him.
All I know is he didn't take any time to leave Esau. He was like, "Oh, Jacob's here. Whew.
See you.
I'm out of here."
Right.
Oh yeah, what a good boy. He brings us all the good things. What a good boy.
Said you got cheese.
I am so
Dates?
glad I passed the blessing over to you, my boy.
Good to see you. Here's the keys.
Yeah.
See you a couple of times a year. Bye.
Yeah. Bye bye.
By the way,
All
your brother's
right.
gonna try to kill you when I die. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Start working out. Okay. So, okay. What is this about? It says, for Isaac had returned from the well of the oath and gone up to the tower of his father Abraham. It doesn't say that he did that when Jacob got back. It said, for Isaac had returned from the well of the oath and gone up to the tower of his father, and he dwelt there apart from his son Esau. So he left to get away from Esau, is what it seems like to me. And then it says, for in the days, or because in the days when Jacob went to Mesopotamia, Esau took to himself a wife, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like, to me, it sounds like it's saying Abraham left and did his thing, but because Jacob's doing all this stuff over here, like he's getting away from him. That's what it just seems like to me.
Right.
Well, now that you reread it, because of course, I should have read it the first time, but Jacob's going back to the right, back out of the land essentially into Mesopotamia, maybe to gain more land, maybe to farm more or whatever. But Esau takes a wife from Ishmael. This is the first time we hear of a good marriage. The first two were Canaanite women, which made the mama grieve. Now it's, oh, dad, Jacob's back. And I remember he's the guy with the blessing because he married the right woman. What if I go and marry one of the right women? And I wonder if that's why Isaac's like, oh boy, because I see what you're trying to do here. You're not. This doesn't sound like, oh, and God sent him Mahalath, or that he just fancied her so much he had to take another wife. It was, oh, Jacob's back, and well, if I go marry the right woman, what's wrong with me jumping back in the conversation again? Why can't I be a part of the story? And Isaac was like, I'm out of here. No, we're not playing this. He said, she said, brother against brother nonsense. You can marry all the good women you want. You're not getting the blessing. We already did this.
I think Isaac might have been blind, but he could see that coming from a mile away.
off to the right.
Well, what's interesting here too is because the dynamic of this. I'm kind of reading into it a little bit, but his mom and dad are at the tower. It isn't just Isaac. Because it says in 16, and to his mother Rebecca also, and it says between the times, blah, 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 and between the winter, spring, to the tower of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
So mom's there with dad. They're not split up. They're not going through a divorce or anything like that. But I think what's interesting is that his mother's heart is with him, is with Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
And Isaac always had a love for his son Esau. So I think this is more of that interaction that we're given, where maybe at this point Esau is kind of like, not Esau, I'm sorry, Isaac's kind of like, I think it's time we need to go. So, honey, let's pack our stuff. We're going to the tower. We're going to my dad's tower he built, and we're going to hang out there. And so you see that it's not just Isaac that's at the tower, but it's also his wife as well.
Yeah. So in 18 it says, and he gathered together all the flocks of his father and his wives, and went up and dwelt on Mount Seir, and left Isaac his father at the well of the oath alone.
Yes.
So he was left there alone. So, okay.
So it looks like then he left and not so much dad, you think?
Yeah, he left, and then dad's like, okay, you're back. I'm going to the tower, and I'm gonna leave you here.
Yeah.
Went to Jacob. Okay. So sorry for all that, guys. I think we kind of got back on track now, but
yes.
And it does say over here on the right hand side, it says, in contrast with Jacob's conduct to his parents, Esau is unfilial. If I'm pronouncing that word correct, I don't know what that means, but I'm thinking it means bad.
I think it means like you don't like your family. You're not in the family business.
That's actually that word's not in my book, even though we're reading from the same thing. That word didn't make the print. All I have is Esau is.
That's funny. No, so that word means not having or showing the qualities associated with a son or daughter.
Right. It basically means unaffiliated, right?
Yeah, but in a family sense, like a literal mother father situation. Yeah, very interesting.
Thither Jacob sent all that he did send. Interesting. to his father and his mother from time to time all they needed. He fully provided for his parents.
Absolutely.
You know, so he's like, all right, Dad, you're retired. You know, I got the sheep from here. I got the family business. I got all this. You're good.
Yep.
And he takes care of Mom and Dad. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's what a blessing.
And then they bless Jacob with all of their heart and all of their soul. How amazing is that?
Yep.
And speaking of that blessing, you know, what we see there is, you know, when God later gives us the 10 commandments, the ones that have already all existed, but they're officially on the tablets now, they're officially Moses brought down and shown to the people. That one is honor your father and mother. And we read that today as, oh, when you're 6, 7, 10, 12, 15, do what your parents say. Listen to their rules. When you
Right.
get to when you're 18, you can move out and do whatever you want. And that's the way that's been treated. And there's no scriptural precedent for that. I mean, that's a modern version of what we're reading into the story or reading into the commands. But in reality, honor your father and mother is, as long as they're your father and mother, you honor them. And all throughout scripture, you see that, you know, like when the son gets married, he goes and gets the wife. They spend some time together. They do the leave and cleave, as the scripture says. But then he builds his house on dad's house, and he learns the family business, and he takes it over to then further take care of the family. He doesn't take it over to say, you know, this is a hostile takeover. Now everything's mine. It's, hey, let's keep this going. Let's keep the good on the right track. Let's make generational wealth. Let's figure out a way to win as this family unit. And so we've just gotten so far from that. And I love that we see Jacob saying, hey, Mom and Dad, you sent me away, so I did what you said. I'm honoring you. And now that I'm back, I'm just going to continue to honor you with the blessings that you sent me away to go get. You sent me to go get the wives and all the story. And do I have a story to tell you when I get back? But now that I'm here, I appreciate the good look, but also there were some struggles. But now I'm here. It's time to bless you again. It's time to go back and be a good son. It's time to go back and show the world, it through the scriptures for all eternity. This is how you honor your father and mother. And that they recognized it, and it says that they blessed him. So, you know, to receive that blessing, like we talked about a few chapters ago, when he blessed Jacob with the inheritance, when he blessed Jacob with the birthright, he's now blessing Jacob with all his heart and with all his soul. But guess what? He wasn't really doing that earlier. It was still kind of Team Esau a little bit. Now he's like, all my heart and soul, Jacob, I should have known. I'm glad I know now. I'm glad I'm married to the woman I'm married to. I'm glad you're my son, and I'm glad we're in this story. And I'm glad I can retire knowing that things are going to go on the right track and things are in good hands. So when we look at that, let's read our scriptures. Let's make sure that we find ourselves in good hands and honor our fathers and mothers. And if we have children, help them to learn that lesson as well.
Absolutely. And it's sad that we have to, today in our modern world, we have things like Mother's Day and Father's Day. Don't wait for some government affiliated day to honor your mother and your father. Do that all the time. Matter of fact, go call your mom and daddy and tell them you love them if they're available. And with that, we'll see you next time for chapter 30 in the book of Jubilees. God bless.
Ciao.
Shalom.